Hey, I'm Nick.
Mitch.
I'm Logan.
Bonner. The video slash story that we're gonna talk about is actually one that's close to me. It's a little bit older. It's 2 years old, but it's from 2016. But it was from my hometown. It's a domestic a family violence story, and during using domestic abuse. And it's about a family of five, mom, a dad, 8-year-old, a 5-year-old, and then a little baby girl. And the story is basically just a family from my hometown that the mom was going through domestic violence with the father, and she was just looking out for the family for a long time, and then eventually one day she decided she had enough. She told the cops she was going to be leaving. The cops asked her if she needed any help, and she was like, "No, this shouldn't be a problem. I'm just going to go home, get my family out of the situation. If I don't call in an hour, come by the house just to see if we're okay." So she went home to get her stuff. The cop didn't hear from her for after the hour she went. The cop came to the house and found that it was a murder/suicide. Like, the father killed the whole entire family and then killed himself, which is a pretty crazy story from my little hometown, and I thought it would be a good story to use for some of these theories.
Yeah, because a lot of these theories apply. The first one that we found that really kind of struck gold with the case was the control theory, because just the power and control that the father had over the family was huge, probably financially too. We don't really know the inside story of who worked and who didn't, but in that situation you would assume that because she couldn't get out for so long that she was dependent in some way.
Yeah, that really kind of relates to the dependency relations theory with the daughter and the dad, because the dad kind of caused the whole turmoil, obviously, but with that, I mean, there was a lot of factors playing into how the family was reacting. I mean, and when I say family further in, I mean like the children, because they look at the parents, and especially the dad, who's probably the provider of the family, and looked at him more as like a kind of like the leader, or you're in charge. Like they depend and relate on him, and it kind of just played in, and they didn't think of it as abuse, but more of just like they're kind of the leader of the house, and they kind of like respected that in a way. But
I mean, the oldest kid was only 8, and she didn't know any better, so she probably thought this was kind of how everything worked, and that's all she knew, really. So she didn't really have any say in it, and the mother couldn't really do a whole lot just because she was dependent on the father, we can assume. But another theory, it kind of branches off the dependency theory. It's the intrafamilial stress theory, and it basically talks about factors such as having more children, which they had 3, and then it mentions having children with disabilities. And not that this is a disability, but we found out that the daughter, who was 2, Willow, I think it was days after she was born, she needed a heart transplant. So you can only imagine the stress everyone felt, and emotionally and financially.
Well, it was like a pretty crazy heart transplant, because they made like the New York Times for it, and they were like
National
on TV.
news.
Yeah, they were national news for it and stuff.
And the other thing that we thought about too is the stress that it put on the father financially too of the heart transplant, because that's a very expensive procedure, even if insurance is involved. Yeah, very much so. So that could have been another factor. And also just the stress of having 3 children, because my parents have 3 kids too, and they knew the stress of how tough it was and everything.
I'm one of 4. My dad was one of 6. So
I'm one of
Big
3.
families.
I'm one of 3. So
I only got 2. I'm good.
I think another theory that involves this is the family life cycle theory. I mean, the kids were getting older, getting bigger, and the fact that he was kind of gonna lose the whole entire family would probably play some big. Once the mother decided, that plays a really big factor.
It drove.
That's another big
Probably
factor
it's a
too, that
big
women.
thing.
that was probably the final straw for him, at least.
Yeah.
And another big
I
factor
can't
too
have
is
you.
that women most of the time win the custody battles with your children, so it's another huge factor that
especially
plays
with
into the role.
abuse
Just all
involved.
drove him and caught into his head.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely a stressful situation.
Yep.
The straw that broke the camel's back, as
Yep.
they say.
Straw that broke Capasso's back.
All right,
I would say.
have a good one.
All right.
Thanks Thanks for watching.